Hello, welcome to White Threads FlossTube 104. Thanks so much for joining me today. There's a few things I wanted to go through with you today. The first is that I'm going to be away from early next week till late the following week. My younger daughter finished her high schooling last year, and when my elder daughter finished, they have a thing in Australia called schoolies. Schoolies is that all the school leavers go off to often the Gold Coast and party away and get drunk and make nuisances of themselves. And my elder daughter said to me, "Mum, can you forbid me to go to schoolies?" And I said, "Okay, I forbid you to go to schoolies." So it ended up that through a series of things, she and I took a short trip to Japan and stayed with some friends in Tokyo, and we went fabric shopping in Tokyo's fabric district. And we ate Japanese food, and we went and saw some of the sights in Tokyo, and we went out of Tokyo one day, and we just had a fabulous time. It was only about 5 days long, but it was just a lovely trip for the two of us together. So I made the assumption that when it came time for my younger daughter to finish school, that my husband would go on a trip with her. That seemed fair to me. But no, she said, "Mum, no, it has to be you and me. It has to be us going." So, right. So with COVID rather limiting travel, there was always the question towards the end of last year, well, from the beginning of last year, even while COVID was on the whole time, you know, we knew that this was coming up. She was going to be finishing school at the end of last year, and she would want to go on her trip with Mum to celebrate her end of school. But there were really no options for where we could go. And so there were a few different things that went through her mind. It was always going to be something that was fairly active. So it wasn't going to be a trip like fabric shopping in Tokyo. So it turns out that the chosen trip is for us to go to the Formula One Grand Prix in Melbourne. So I have no interest in car racing at all, but she does. She loves it. AlphaTauri, I don't even know how to say it, is her favourite team. So we're going to go down to Melbourne and do that. We're going to go to the football as well while we're there. I'm not into football either. But this is my active daughter, the one that if you've been reading my blog for any length of time, you would know as the gymnast. So yes, she's an active thrill seeker, and while we're down there, she will also be trying out for a sporting program that she would like to gain access to. So we'll just see how that goes. Who knows? So yes, from about, I think, well, early next week till the end of the following week, I'll be away. So I'll make a note of that on my website so that you know. So if you place any orders during that time, I won't be able to fill them till I get back, which I apologise for, but that's the way it is. We have to do these rites of passage. We're going to the Melbourne Grand Prix. Woohoo. I'm sure we will have a fabulous time. We're staying with some friends down there, and that will be absolutely lovely. So yeah, it'll be great. So another thing that I wanted to remind you of was my 2 courses, in-person classes that I have coming up. One of them is this one here, which is the Sardinian knotted embroidery for beginners class, and that's going to be on at the beginning of May, and I'll put a link down below the video for where you can how you can get to that to find out more information and bookings. And then this one is the Frisian Whitework Tree of Life class workshop, and that will be at the end of May here in Walker. Now Walker is about 5-6 hours driving from Sydney, and it's about 7 hours driving from Brisbane. We have an airport at Armidale, which is about 45 minutes away, so if you needed to fly into Armidale, you can hire a car there, come to Walker, stay in Walker. There's quite a few options for accommodation, and I would just absolutely love to have you as part of my class. So anyone really from Australia can come to these classes, and it's just a lovely weekend away to spend some time stitching with other people who also love stitching. We often go out to dinner at the local pub on the Saturday night so that we can have some fun time together, just being social. And yeah, Walker's a lovely place, so I would love it if you would join me there. Now, the other thing is that one of the questions that I often get asked is, will this thread work for this? Now, I know this is going to surprise you. It's going to be quite controversial, but I don't know everything. Yeah, I know. That's hard to believe, but I don't. So when people ask me these sorts of questions, sometimes I know the answer because sometimes it is something I'm familiar with. But quite often I've got absolutely no idea. And for me to give the answer, I would need to have that thread and that fabric and do that style of stitching and actually test it out to see if it worked. But it doesn't have to be me that does that. It could be you. You could take your thread, your fabric, your style of stitching, whatever the stitch is or whatever, and try it out. And if it works, you'll know it works. If it doesn't, you'll know it doesn't. It's exactly the same process that I would have to go through to find out the answer to that. You have the answers at your fingertips. So today I wanted to go through and I wanted to show you the sort of experiments that I would do if I had a question like that. So what I'm going to do is I've gone and got 2 different threads out of my cupboard. They are just totally random threads, neither of which I have ever used before. And I'm going to show you the process that I would go through if I was trying to work out whether they will work on the fabric that I've chosen, which in this case I just pulled out some 28 count linen, and the stitches that I would use to figure out whether it's going to work. Now, I've used Frisian whitework as the example because in Frisian whitework there are basically 3 things that I want to know that it will work for. I want to know that my thread thickness will work for just plain old normal satin stitch, so in line with the grain of the fabric. But one of the other stitches that's really common in Frisian whitework is diagonal satin stitch. And diagonal satin stitches sit much closer together than they do when they're stitched in line with the fabric threads. So I need to know that my thread will work for the straight ones and for the diagonal ones, but I also need to know that it's going to work for pulled thread stitches, so that when I take stitches and pull them tight to leave holes around them, that thread's not going to be too fat or too thin. So those are the 3 things that I want to test. So I'm going to do a little demonstration for you so you can see how I check these things out, so that hopefully it gives you the confidence to make those same sorts of experiments for yourself, so you can find out whether your thread will work with your fabric, with your stitches. So here I have a piece of Frisian whitework. This is the whitework sampler from my book Frisian Whitework, Dutch Embroidery from Friesland. And I wanted to show you this section around here because we've got 2 of the stitches that I would try out. Sorry, we've got 3 of them that I would try out to see whether the thread was right or not. So here we have diagonal satin stitch, and here we have satin stitch that's in line with the grain of the fabric. And you can see that they sit further apart than these ones do. They are all very close together here, and they are much further apart here. That is the same thread as that. Then down here, it's been used to work channel stitch, which is a pulled thread stitch that creates reasonable holes. It's got some double thickness stitching so that you can see when it looks too thick. And so that thread there, and this thread here are all the one thread. And so I've probably chosen it on the basis of stitching all of those to make sure that that thickness of thread was going to work. So I have here a piece of, I think it's 28 count linen. It's the one that I teed out and dyed in my recent tea dyeing demonstration. And I've got some thread. This is some, now what is it? It's 100% mercerized cotton, 20S crochet. I picked that up ages ago. I've never used it, as you can see by the fact that it's still got its plastic around it. I have pulled a bit out from underneath the plastic. I have no idea whether this is going to work or not. I don't know anything about the thread at all because I've never used it before. And then I also found this, which is, I think, a very, very fine crochet cotton that was in my drawer. I think this is going to be too fine, but it's what I found. And so I thought, well, I'll give that a go and we'll see how it turns out. So those are the two threads that I'm going to try out. I've got no idea how they're going to work, but that's what we're going to have a look at. So I'm using the crochet cotton here. It is 100% mercerized cotton, 20S crochet. Yeah, I've put a knot in the end of it because this is only a sample and I really don't care whether there's a knot. All I need to do is check whether this is going to work for me or not. So what I will start off doing is just some regular satin stitch. I'm left-handed, so if this looks khaki-handed to you, that's why. So I'll just start stitching. And what I need for my satin stitch is to have a thread that gives good coverage of the base fabric but doesn't have too many gaps in between and isn't too close together either. I mean, it's not going to be a problem if it's too close together really for this one, because I don't think it's going to be, but it's going to be more of a problem whether it's too close together for the others. This looks like a thread that it might work nicely for our satin stitch, the regular satin stitch, which is this one. Maybe not so well for the diagonal and probably too tight for the diagonal satin stitch. No, it's pull thread stitching. Okay, so I've had a look at that. It's probably a little bit gappy, but it might be about right, so we'll go with that. And then I'll move down to 4. Honestly, it doesn't matter. I don't need to count it. That's just me being normal and always counting. So each time I'm just dropping down one thread from where I either went in or came out. There's a bit of creaking in the background today that you may be able to hear. It's quite blustery and windy outside, so there's also a flagpole nearby that's flapping about madly in the wind. So if you can hear some funny noises in the background, that's probably what it is. Okay, so that's probably enough of our diagonal satin stitch, and honestly that doesn't look too bad. Now I'm going to just come over here and work some channel stitch. Now I'm not demonstrating the stitches here, you can see what I'm doing, but I'm not explaining them to you as I go, because that's not the purpose of this. The purpose of this is to figure out whether this thread works on this fabric. Sorry, I think I might have moved out of the camera for a little while there. When I'm not working in a hoop, it's harder to stay in the right place. This thread looks like it might be a reasonable size for this. Actually, it's not a bad thread to work with. I'll do a bit of this because it's the one that's probably least likely to work with, so it's the one that I want to know that it's working with, if it is. So this is channel stitch that I'm working. And that's probably about enough. So I'll just park the thread over at the side. I'll stop getting in the way. Okay, so we have our 3 stitches there. We have our regular satin stitch, which sits in line with the fabric threads. We have a diagonal satin stitch, which crosses the threads on the bias. And then we have our drawn thread stitching, pulled thread stitching, which is channel stitch. And what we want is to choose a thread that works okay for all of them. Now I think it's probably just a tad too thick for this, but I will probably say it's okay.
it's pretty good coverage there. It's fine coverage there. So I would say that, yeah, this is a successful thread on this fabric. So this time I'm using unnamed, unlabeled, I had a label once obviously, crochet thread. Well, it looks to be crochet thread. It's very fine, and I think based on the experiment we've just done, this is going to be way too fine. But I'm going to do it anyway because I won't know unless I've tried, and that's the thing I say to you. You can find these things out for yourself by trying them. Now I'm just tying a knot in that thread there. I don't care about using knots when it's just on a sample like this. I wouldn't use them on my actual work except if they're going to be waist knots that come off later. Okay, so I'm going to start stitching up here, and I'll do the same as what I did before. Just stitch over 4 threads. Yeah, see, that's way, way, way too skinny, even with the extra hair included. There's not a chance I would ever use this thread on this fabric on the basis of just this stitching. It might work fine for the drawn thread work, it might be perfect for that, but the thing is we need to use the same thread throughout. Okay, so that's enough of the straight satin stitch, and now I'm just going to do diagonal, so 1, 2, 3, 4. Again, I don't have to actually count it, but that's just me being me, I do count. I think this is going to be way too thin for this as well. But as I said, I won't know till I actually tried. Otherwise I could ask someone, but they're going to only have to try it out too. Yeah, that's awful. Really awful. No way. Yuck, 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 yuck. So I'm going to come up over here, and now I'll work our pulled thread stitches. And my hunch is that it'll look quite nice with this because it's so fine. And if I was choosing to use a different thread for this, which I wouldn't for this style of embroidery because I only ever use the one thickness of thread, then this one is probably perfect for this. Yeah, that's looking really nice. Works well with it. It's way too thin for the others though, so therefore I can't choose it on the basis of this because I need it looking good for all 3, not just for this one. Okay, that's probably enough because I think I've proved my point. Okay, so if we look at these together, where's my needle? Works great for that. Works awfully for that. Works great for that. Works awfully for that. It works okay for that, and it works beautifully for that. So on the basis of my experiments with these 3 different threads, I would not choose this thread, I would choose this one. Now there may be a better thread that works better than this, but if these were the 2 threads that I had to choose from, this is the one that I would choose. So I hope that shows you the different experiments that I would work to figure out which thread is best for this purpose.
So I hope that was helpful to you. I hope that you understood the process that I went through and why I did each of those stitches. I hope that was really clear, and I hope that it gives you the confidence to try these things out for yourself. I know that sometimes it's really nice to just be able to ask someone else and get the answer given to you, but you're going to learn so much more by trying to find those answers out for yourself. And that doesn't mean just by asking someone, it means by making an experiment and seeing how it goes. I say this again and again and again. You don't need to ask someone for the answer. You can find it out for yourself, and you do have the ability to do that. So thank you so much for joining me today, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye.